Welcome back to Jacques in the Garden. Today we're going to be talking about when, where, how, and why you want to start your fall vegetable garden right now. So I'm standing here in my seedling area, and these are the majority of my fall starts for now. I have many more flats that I need to start, particularly for things like onions. I want to talk a little bit about why you want to start your seeds now. So things like broccolis, cauliflowers, cabbages, those kind of things you can potentially get as a winter harvest. What that means is that if you plant it out now in the fall, sometime in like early winter, say maybe November, December, you will start beginning to get some harvest. Now the critical thing that a lot of people don't think about is that as we get out of summer, into fall, and into winter, the amount of sunlight hours decreases every single day until the middle of winter, where it hits its minimum, and after that it starts increasing up into spring. So why does this matter so much? Well, these are two cauliflower starts. They're the same variety. This one was started on August 22nd, whereas this was started on September 7th. So you can see the size difference is quite dramatic. If I were to put these out right now, there's almost no chance I'll actually get a cauliflower by the time I get into winter. But what's fine is that I could still grow these out and I'll transplant them and I'll actually get a harvest in early spring. That's when the sunlight hours start increasing, allowing that cauliflower to actually grow and form properly. Now these are big enough to the point that if I put them out right now, they'll grow very quickly until the sunlight hours drop, and they might even produce a head of cauliflower by the time I get into winter. If not, they'll just be an even earlier harvest of cauliflower in the springtime. So that's why you want to start early. You're battling the sunlight hours, and you need the plant to be up to a certain growth stage that has enough leaves that even with diminished light, it could still actually grow properly throughout the winter. So now let's talk about what plants I have started right now and what plants I have growing in the garden and where I put them and why I put them in those specific locations. And let's think a little bit about planning your actual fall space. So let's start things off in the south garden. This is the garden that's closest to my kitchen door. So this is actually really important when you're thinking about what you want to grow for your fall and winter. For example, right here I have red Russian kale right in the very front at the closest point to the entrance of the garden. That's because something like red Russian kale you're going to harvest on a more regular basis. You're going to want to come out here, collect those leaves maybe every couple days, whereas something like a broccoli is further back because it's going to be something that once it grows you'll harvest, but then it'll continuously produce new side shoots that you could continuously harvest throughout the winter. So you still want it close to the front, but you don't want it necessarily right up against the door because it's not going to be producing constantly. So as I move further away from this particular bed, I'm getting into things that I planted in the summertime that are going to be producing into the fall, but I'm going to be cutting out as I get into winter. For example, right here I have 3 determinate tomatoes. They're all starting to set. I actually see some little fruits. So these will hopefully be ready in about 2 to 3 months. And in that time frame, actually, we're looking at maybe November, hopefully, that I'll get a nice crop of late summer tomatoes, not really summer anymore, maybe early fall tomatoes, make a little sauce, swap this in for some nice winter vegetables. Anything I plant in here in November is going to be something that I'm not expecting to eat really until springtime. So this is when you start getting into that hunger gap where you don't have anything growing. Now let's move over to this half of the garden and talk about what I have growing over here. So now we've made it over here to this side of the garden where I have my cucumber trellis that still has a little bit of a hangover of the final cucumbers that I grew in summertime. But over here I actually have my heading broccoli. So now we've moved further away from the kitchen, and this is a broccoli that's going to produce slower, and that's why I have it further away. It's not something I'm going to expect until at the very earliest, maybe November, and that's why I have it located further away from the door, because it's not something I need to check very regularly. Now, on this back wall here, I have my first succession of peas in the ground, and now I have shelling peas, and I also have snap peas. Those will be the first sort of foray into my peas for this year. It might be a little early because for us in San Diego, the fall is actually really hot, but I figured might as well start because I don't have anything else to trellis right now anyway, so I don't need a trellis sitting here empty for no reason. As I cross over to this side, I have the great bean trial, which is not that great. It's not doing that well. Let me bring you in a little bit closer to show you guys what's going on. So I'm down here in my great bean trial of 2022, and as you can see, it's not going too great. The beans just don't look that healthy, honestly. I think this little late season rain actually did not help them very much. And I think this part of the garden is simply just too cool and doesn't get enough light for these beans to really be happy. So I'm ready to rip these all out and basically wash my hands of the 2022 bean year. It was not the year for me for beans, as much as I love beans, but we'll talk about that another time. Now, behind me is my next fall/winter garden. And what I have here is actually some cabbages. Once again, I am now the furthest away from my kitchen door, and that is why the cabbages are here. Once you harvest the cabbage, You can technically regrow a second cabbage from it, but it's not really worth the time and effort. So this is a harvest once and you're done, and that's why it's the furthest away from my kitchen door. The broccoli is a little closer because once you harvest that crown, you'll start getting side shoots that you could continuously harvest. The nice thing is that right now it's not getting that much light because of the asparagus, but this asparagus is already starting to brown, which means that I'll be cutting it down probably within a month, and that'll open up a lot more light to the side of the garden. So that's kind of what's going on with my fall garden right now, and sort of the reasons behind it. But I have another section in the north garden where I also have some fall plants, so let's go take a look at that. So now we're down here in the north garden, I guess up here in the north garden, and what you could see is I'm walking on this bed. The reason why I'm walking on this bed is that it's my no-dig bed, and I don't really have a problem walking on no-dig beds because the soil really isn't like fluffed up and aerated in a natural way. So what do I have growing here? Again, this is further from my kitchen, so I have things that grow a little bit slower that are single-time harvest. For example, this front row is all Copenhagen market cabbages. Those are cabbages that are great for making like a sauerkraut. So once those are ready, I'll be harvesting them all at once and making a bunch of fermented cabbage. As I come further down the line, I actually have my Brussels sprouts. So the Brussels sprouts are here because this side of the garden gets a lot of sun, and Brussels sprouts are a very slow growing crop. If you don't give them enough sun, they're going to take a really long time, and then once spring gets hot, they're going to get covered in aphids, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you want to make sure that when you're growing your Brussels sprouts, you start them really early, and you give them a place that gets a lot of sun in that early early fall, early winter time period, because if they don't get big enough, they're just simply not going to work for you, and you're going to be really sad you wasted your time. So I have, I believe, 8 Brussels sprouts here and 6 cabbages. You'll also notice that I put a ton of fresh straw down on the ground. The reason why I did this is because as we get into our winter, quote unquote, we will be getting a little bit colder. I want to insulate the ground. I also want to protect it from rain. We don't get that much rain in San Diego, but covering your soil is a really good way of keeping it in place and allowing that rainwater to actually infiltrate into the soil instead of just washing away. The other nice thing about the straw is that it will break down over this winter cycle, help feed the soil, and also help deter some of the pest issues I've had. I've noticed that if I put fresh straw down, things like roly-polies and earwigs won't attack my plants as much because they'll actually be able to focus on the straw. Whereas if the straw is really old, like the stuff in the pathways here, which was originally the straw on this bed that I moved back into the pathways, they're not really interested in messing with that anymore because there's nothing left for them to really eat. So this is a great way to sort of feed your soil while feeding the insects that might be pests in your garden. So those are kind of the 2 major fall gardens that I have growing right now. But as you saw, I have a lot of different fall starts and a lot of space that I still need to plant out. I'm looking in particular at my pepper beds and my tomatoes in my Florida Weave section, which are at the time that they're about ready to come out of the ground. But a lot more to come. I'm going to be starting a lot of container gardens for fall, and I'm also going to be getting ready to plant all my garlic and onions. So stay tuned for that, but I hope you guys picked up a couple tips about how to start your fall garden, and I'll see you next time.